Next
So, Greg,
faction, a little
yeah.
randomizer. And I think we're gonna do a faction that I honestly really don't know much about because you wanted to cover these guys, but it's gonna be the Soviet Union, and you've picked some guys I would have not thought of.
Now, let's perhaps start with the worst. I think they are very interesting characters. So, for the worst, I have actually two picks, and that is Marshal Grigory Kulik and Marshal Semyon Budyonny. Now, both men were, big time Bolshevik allies of Stalin and Lenin, which is why they obviously rose to the top. And at the start of Barbarossa, they had survived the military purges of Stalin completely unscathed. They were like Zhukov and Konev in that regards. Now, let's start with Semyon Budyonny. The reason he is here was, first of all, he was a man with absolute no military knowledge at a high command level, completely zero. Like, he would make Lord God look competent. And he was given, so during the Second World War, he was commander of the Ukrainian forces, so which was the Soviet armed forces of the southwestern direction. So he literally had two fronts, which are like two army groups under his command at the start of Barbarossa. So that's a huge concentration of men. And during that, he was he had no sense, and he stuck to Stalin's orders of not yielding 1 foot, and the Germans completely encircled and outmaneuvered him at any given point. That he would ultimately see that 1.5 million men of his were casualties. 1.5 million in just a battle of a few months. So the one was the Battle of Uman in the Ukraine, and this is like the army groups led by Gert von Rundstedt. He suffers 200,000 casualties in that one battle alone. And then you have the Battle of Kiev, which was a 2 month battle with, again, Grunstedt's army group. And despite having a huge numerical advantage compared to the Germans at this point, he would have 700,000 casualties from the Battle of Kiev. So this really surrendered all of the Ukraine and the southern side of the Russian fronts to the Germans. Considering Ukraine was also a pretty big breadbasket, it's a big loss. And yeah, Stalin did sack him as a scapegoat, and he was never allowed to command troops again. He was put in reserve, but luckily he always remained a good buddy of Stalin and survived the war. Died a hero and everything. I think it was Marshal Konev who said to a Yugoslav communist, Dilas, Budoni never knew much and never studied anything. He showed himself to be completely incompetent and permitted awful mistakes to be made. Uh, and Gert von Rundstedt had something even more archaic to say. He said, he's a man with a very large mustache, but a very small brain.
That's good.
Yeah. And he was also one thing, he opposed the development of tanks, should add. So
What?
when
Okay.
Yes. So before World War II, there was, which is where even our second character will also play a role. Um, Marshal of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Chichevsky, really proposed to create a proper panzer, like a tank, a proper panzer equivalent in Russia.
Mhm.
And he met a lot of opposition, and ultimately it did cost him his life, though his idea proved supreme. And Budoni was a staunch proponent of horse cavalry, and he was one of the guys who testified against Mikhail and got him executed. And he said that tanks are so inferior to cavalry that is illogical that it amount to sabotage or wrecking of the Soviet armed forces. And after being told of the importance of the tank in the upcoming war, he said, "You won't convince me. As soon as war is declared, everyone will shout, 'Send for the cavalry.'"
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah. I really would like to see, like, a few corps of Russian horsemen and Cossacks on horseback against a panzer column. Let's see that one day.
I'm just like I'm trying to imagine how the Russians would have learned that lesson in the Russo-Japanese War and then again in World War One. And for this guy to start saying that now, that is really interesting.